The conference room was stylishly decorated with sleek, modern furniture, but it felt sterile and uninviting. Joe sat at the far corner of the room, uncomfortable and unassuming. He was a new hire, and he was waiting for his first team meeting. He was unsure of what to expect. Suddenly, the door opened, and a tall, beautiful woman stepped in. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored pantsuit and held a sleek tablet computer in her hands. She crossed the room gracefully, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, and perched herself on the edge of the desk in front of him. The woman smiled slightly, her lips forming a thin line. "Hello, Joe," she said. "My name is Jen. I'm here to offer you a job, but before I can do that, I need to understand who you are." The woman paused, then continued. "Tell me, Joe, who are you? What makes you who you are?" Joe was taken aback. He wasn't sure how to answer. After a moment, he said hesitantly, I'm not sure." Jen nodded. "That's okay. Take some time and think about it. We'll still be here when you decide." Joe pondered the question for a moment. Finally, after a few beats of silence, he answered, "I am a creative thinker and an analytical problem solver. I am ambitious and determined to succeed. I am passionate and eager to learn. I am open-minded and willing to explore new possibilities. I want to make a difference in the world, and I believe I have the skills to do so." Jen smiled broadly. "You're exactly who I'm looking for, Joe," she said. She motioned for him to join her, and the two of them walked out of the conference room, leaving Joe a newly hired employee at a mysterious tech startup, with no idea of what lay ahead. The hallway was long, dark, and strangely quiet. Joe followed Jen, feeling out of place and slightly intimidated by the strange atmosphere. She stopped in front of a large door with the word signing written across it in bold letters. "This is the signing room," said Jen, pushing the door open. "You must sign all the necessary documents before you can officially start working here." Joe stepped inside and was immediately overwhelmed. There was a large wooden desk in the middle of the room, and it was covered in papers, contracts, and forms of all sizes. Every item had to be read and signed in triplicate, a daunting task that seemed to be never-ending. After what felt like hours, Joe finally finished signing every document and form. He felt drained and exhausted. Suddenly, Jen reappeared, holding a tablet computer. "Great, just one final step," she said. "You just need to complete the mandatory IRP process." Joe was confused. He had never heard of this before. "The mandatory what process?" he asked. Jen smiled. "Information rights package," she said crisply. "The company just needs a bit more information from you in order to optimize your experience here and protect your data." She continued to explain the process, but Joe couldn't follow along. It all seemed too complicated. "Don't worry, it's completely normal," she said reassuringly. "Everyone in the company goes through this. It just includes your past financial history, internet searches, and phone access. Just type in your information and we'll take care of the rest. It's just for business purposes. There is nothing to worry about." Joe hesitated for a moment, feeling uneasy. He wasn't sure if this was really normal, or even if it was legal. But he was new to big companies and didn't want to draw attention to himself by speaking out. So he reluctantly complied, typing in all of his personal data on the tablet. When he was done, Jen smiled and thanked him. Then she handed him a packet of informational material. "Here you go," she said. "All the information you need to start your position at the company." Joe took the packet and returned to his desk. As he looked through the material, he couldn't help but feel uneasy about what he had just done. Joe stepped out of the office and into the hallway. He was officially a part of the company now, but he felt out of place. Then he heard voices coming from a nearby room. He peered in and saw a small group of people talking, all wearing the same gray suits and all speaking in overly rehearsed corporate jargon. Joe shook hands with the team members and introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Joe," he said. "I'm the new hire." The members looked at him curiously. None of them knew much about him, but there was something strangely familiar in their eyes. "Well, Joe, this is Dave," said one of the team members, pointing to a middle-aged man with a mop of gray hair. "And Rob," he continued, pointing to a tall, lanky man with glasses. "And Susan," he finished, pointing to an attractive woman with bright blue eyes. Joe smiled nervously and gave a small nod as the trio welcomed him warmly. The team talked amongst themselves for a few minutes before finally turning their attention to Joe. They asked him questions about his background, his hobbies, and his aspirations. Joe answered eagerly, but the other members seemed uninterested in his answers. Instead, they replied with short, cryptic phrases or changed the topic to seemingly unrelated conversations. Right, so what exactly?" Dave began before trailing off, as if lost in thought. The atmosphere in the room was tense and slightly off-putting. Joe started thinking about his past jobs, the awkward small talk there had been, the moments of boredom when he had struggled to connect with anyone else in the room. But here it felt different, like a pressure was lurking in the air, an unspoken anxiety that had never been present in his other workplaces. He quickly shook off the thought as he walked back to his desk. Joe settled into his new desk, feeling overwhelmed but excited at the same time. Then, one of the team members approached him with a folder. "We've assigned you your first assignment," she said, handing him the folder. Joe opened it and quickly scanned the contents. The document started stating the objectives for the company, then went on to list its key performance indicators and metrics it was tracking. But there was no clear task for him. Still, Joe tried to make sense of it. He spoke with other team members, asking questions and researching the company's mission statement. But none of it made any sense. He worked out that the first thing he needed to do was gain access to the mysterious ARR system used to store the company's quarterly reports. But before that, one had to set up what seemed like an illogical labyrinth of accounts and credentials. Joe contacted the IT porto he had been assigned, who directed him to the HR team to get his employee number. But in order to obtain the employee number, he would need to submit a request to the mysterious business support team. Business support informed him that no employee number was given until the probation period had been passed, and asked Joe to use a temporary number to apply for the account. HR were able to create a temporary ID, but then told Joe he also had to complete an administration profile with the company and acquire a mythical data suit to retrieve the titular number. To access the data suit, he had to go to the IT team and get it authenticated. After much effort, Joe had successfully installed the data suit, but it required a license key, obtainable only from the finance team. He was told he had to complete the compliance training first, so he asked HR for a link and received a response with the contact details for the compliance team. Compliance then asked for his employee number to track the completion, to which Joe balked and explained he had not yet been assigned one. Compliance retorted by asking Joe to submit the compliance test first, and then they would arrange the employee number. To properly proceed, Joe had to provide proof of his start date in the form of a contract, leading to yet another conversation with HR to find out where his contract was. Finally, the compliance team gave Joe the link to the compliance training, which he opened to a remarkable discovery. The login page was titled, ARR, Please Login. Joe's shoulders sagged in resignation. He had gone through a loop of departments over and over again, still no closer to understanding the task or the purpose of the ARR system he was trying to get access to. He looked around the office and noticed that everyone else had already gone home, leaving him alone in an unfamiliar building with an unfinished task that seemed impossible to complete. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, feeling exhausted and defeated. It was 9 p.m. now, and the office was empty. The lights were dimmed and gave off a warm, comforting glow. The furniture was still in its place, and there were no signs of the bustling energy that had filled the room during the day. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of an old chair shifting on its wheels.